Are we good? Okay. Thank you all. I was so happy to see you all enjoying and being as interested in this data as we have since it's come in. But I was hopeful that we could get a couple of report outs from board members or DPI leadership that were in looking at the data together. So some of the questions we would love we don't need to hear from everybody, but a couple of folks, if they wouldn't mind, what seems to be, based on what did you see in the data? What was interesting? What seems to be working or maybe not working? How could this data be used to drive some decisions at the state or local level? Would anybody like to jump in?
At the end, one general observation was that teachers, and this is a very broad thing, not specific, teachers were saying that as a professional, in order to do my job of teaching, there's not a great deal that I need. Just give me some tools, I'm going to make it work. As a person, as a human being, I need support from my school leader. I need my principal to know me. I need for that principal to know what's happening in my classroom. So there seem to be a set of professional needs that we need to pay attention to, but we do not need to ignore the set of personal needs that teachers seem to be expressing through a broad look at this data.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Who else?
I'll say a couple things. In the first three slides anyway, where the demographic was broken out by continue teaching in my current school, continue in an education role, or leave education entirely or retire. It was interesting that the continue in an education role was in many instances lower than those who were retiring or leaving education entirely, and sort of trying to look and see what that means. And we also talked about the fact that I feel like, I may be wrong, but that it might be helpful to break out leave education entirely or retire, because as a principal, one of those is much more actionable for me than the other. And so if the question that was asked was combined, maybe future iterations, there might be value in separating it, unless they were already separated in the initial.
So we did have more options and combine them, because looking at the graphs, there was like 7 options and it was too many. So but I take your point and think when we do some of that disaggregation over the summer together, that kind of feedback, you absolutely should be able to interact with it in a more precise way.
Okay. And then I think one other thing we talked about was the pros and cons of the cadence of doing it every year. I think that it could be great either way. I think that currently, my understanding for a lot of districts would be that when you get the results in the spring as a principal, you do work over the summer with your school improvement team and your leadership team, and you set your principal growth goals for the next year. And part of it, because the principal evaluation instrument requires that you use the teacher working conditions survey results as part of your own growth, that what happens in the next year is that the school improvement team is very much involved in, and the principal in his own goals or her goals around how to address areas of need for their particular school. Yeah. And then they'll do like a mini version of some of the questions in that offspring to see and monitor their progress. And so if you do offer the actual whole survey every year, that throws that off a little bit. And it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, but it does throw that off a little bit. So there'd be some adjustments to how you use now the entire thing versus narrowing in on a few items that they are currently able to do in the off years.
And you could do something, and we have even talked about that, maybe doing an abbreviated version on the off years and then giving districts a section that they add their own items specific to whatever issues they're dealing with at the local level. But no, I certainly, there's pros and cons.
That's right.
Absolutely. Yep. Which is why, but I think asking that's the point of the planning and work session and having these conversations over the summer, but appreciate that certainly. Thank you.
I'm thrilled to announce that in the Northeast, 96% of teachers say they are proud to work in their
that's great.
school. So well done to the Northeast. And I know it looks like it's high all over the state, so that's great. Some of the sort of I think if we were to summarize one of the themes in the results is that is principles are important. And leadership is important.
So important.
And culture, which culture trumps strategy every time, we all know that. But trust is important, professional development is important. And we spent a lot of time talking about this idea of the question about if you could pick 3 things that would most improve your instructional practice. We wondered if we could infer that if they chose the 3 things, does that mean that they don't have them, and that's why they chose them, or does it mean I have them and I want to continue having them? So we wondered about that, but we thought it was really interesting that 52%, which was the outlier in the Northeast anyway, chose time to observe other teachers, and I think that is very telling. I think we talked a lot about how difficult it is to set up non-evaluative teacher evaluations in a building in order to learn from each other. But when you have perhaps a cadre of teachers who are willing to be observed by other teachers so that they can learn from them, then that's a win-win. But I found that question to be fascinating and would love for us to be able to learn a little bit more.
And
down
there's
the road.
actually in survey design, there's something it's like a cognitive interview, where when you do use new items, you actually sit with teachers and say, what were you thinking when you responded to this item?
Yes.
And the guy that we've been working with, so good, Peter Halpin at UNC, he was encouraging us to maybe consider that this summer as part of the validity and reliability analysis piece, so that you could, to make sure that our intent when we were writing items were how the teachers interpreted it on the
I love
ground.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I will point out one more thing really quickly about that question. One of the questions had to do, I think it's the same question that touched on the one where teachers could say whether or not they participated in creating PD in their school, or in designing the budget, or in hiring teachers.
The teaching standards.
Designing the
questions.
budget and hiring teachers were both very low, and that's not a surprise to anyone who's ever worked in the school. Teachers are typically not around in the summer when those things are being done. But one of the things that we know is that one way to improve the diversity of your teaching staff is that when you are trying to attract teachers of color, have other teachers of color at the table when you are doing those interviews. And so I've never, since my very first interview, I've never been on a teacher interview where there were other teachers at the table interviewing for the teacher. And I'm sure it does happen, but this indicates that these survey results indicate that teachers are not part of the interview process.
Yeah, and in the teaching standards, leading in your classroom and leading in your school, these are the examples, that
Yes.
you're given opportunities to do these kinds of things. And so if teachers are being
Yes.
evaluated based on those standards, to ask them, about their opportunities to do so. But some of it could be scheduling, but I think just even having that conversation at the board table is really important.
Yes.
And principles as well. It's
And
in the principal
principles.
evaluation. You ain't getting a distinguished unless you're doing these things.
Yeah, Jeff?
I wanted to piggyback on what Superintendent Truitt said, but first say our group noticed, even when you're looking at the breakout of I'm staying, I'm going to another place, or I'm leaving the profession, everything was still overall positive. It's just lower. And would love to see, I think, to piggyback on what Ms. Moore said, particularly could we break that out by early career, mid-career, later career? Because I wonder if you would start to see differences in what that data would look like, particularly among early career educators, since we know that they leave at a higher rate.
Oh, I
And
see.
so-
Like the intent
Yeah, so you
and
get sort of a
years of experience.
bifurcated.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a second
anyway, it
slice.
would be interesting to see
Yes.
if there's a big difference there.
Oh, I see. Jeff's going to come to my data hackathons.
Yeah, well,
I see.
you-
I get it.
the
You're
geek in me
invited.
was sounded very excited. I was like, sign me up. But the other thing we noticed, in addition to that top one on that instructional support being observe other teachers, if you looked at the next 4 or 5, they're all about teacher collaboration, lesson planning, co-teaching, professional learning communities. And so it got us thinking, like so often when I think about professional development, I think about somebody coming in to help us or us going somewhere else.
Right.
But it may be more about facilitating interactions among teachers that would be the most beneficial, which is it still is going to need resource and capacity, but it's not going to be what you think of, right? It might be more about trying to find time or trying to find ways to cover classes that can help people to do that. But it was fascinating that that was among all 3 groups, the ones that they picked the highest were all about collaboration with other teachers. So.
And that some of the superintendents said to me, there are real resource implications for understanding that section, that data, for exactly the point you're talking about. And I know it was not posted on the report website I saw, so I will make sure that you guys get that right away, that we'll update that and get that released. Yes, Patrick.
So notice the exact same thing about teacher collaboration. 2 light bulbs went off for me. One, I thought back to last month's meeting when Tom Tomberlin talked to us about where teachers are coming from, and 42% of them are alternatively licensed now, which means they missed a student teaching experience. So they're hungry for that level of collaboration in a classroom with another master teacher. It also said we're doing the right thing with advanced teaching roles.
Yes.
Of putting those people back in a classroom with those people, helping them be better co-teaching with them. So 2 big takeaways that are reflected in the data.
I love that. And on those optional demographic items, the licensure status, we could cut the data and see which do traditionally trained licensed teachers versus do they have different needs? I think would be very interesting. Okay, I know this has been awesome. I really appreciate everybody's willingness to participate and engage in the data. I just have a couple final slides to wrap up. So this local use. So I want to be very intentional. I want all of us to be very intentional. Teachers took time out of their day to give us this feedback. So we need to do something with it, right? And so I want us to share the data with teachers. I want you guys, I want us, me, everybody in the room to share the data back with the teachers. Show them, because they'll know how they responded. Let them see where they sit among their peers and discuss the changes you're going to make based on their feedback. That will engender trust and build culture. When you ask them for data again, they will give it to you and they will be honest because you're making changes based on what they're telling you. Provide targeted professional development, instructional supports, resource allocation based on their data, and be explicit about the decisions you're making. And let me know, this has been helpful, but I need to know how you need the data cut to help you make good decisions at the local level for your teachers. Work with your principals and your school improvement teams to use this data in school improvement plans and in district strategic plans, just like Ms. Moore just mentioned. And then share your data with your local school board, with your elected officials, and the community to advocate for your teachers and our public schools. This data is so rich. There is so much in there that it is our responsibility to maximize use of it. And then if you go to the next slide. We have been working, our staff's been working, we've been collecting examples from districts around the state that they say we've used the data all the time, and so we're putting it on the teacher working conditions resource page. We also wrote a promising practice released today about sharing how Clay, Wake County, and Brunswick County very explicitly use teacher working conditions to drive decisions at the local level, and trying to share best practices. If you all have examples, we're continuing to collect them. No need to reinvent. We can just share on the promising practices or on the teacher working conditions page. And just, again, this idea of our responsibility being to make, I mean, many of us sit in leadership positions, we're in decision-making positions, and a lot of teachers are not. This is our chance to kind of show them how much we value your voice and how much we appreciate the work that they do every day for students by improving their working conditions based on this data. So with that, I say thank you guys so much for an opportunity to do this work, and I'm really looking forward to next steps with y'all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Korn. Board members, superintendent advisors, I know we're off schedule, but I always have something in my back pocket, so I think we'll be fine. Stick with us. Tomorrow, we're going to be moving on to talk about opportunities for teachers to advance in the profession as they gain experience. But today, we started with recruitment and preparation to give us some insights and ideas as we now focus squarely on beginning teacher supports. Beginning teachers are leaving the profession at a high rate, and the level of support they receive while entering the profession can make a difference. That's what research from Drs. Ann Cash and Kyle Cox tells us, and they are here to walk us through their research.
All right, thank you for having us. We are thrilled to be here and to share what we've been learning. My name is Dr. Ann Cash. I'm an associate professor in reading and elementary education at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And I'm here today with former teacher, may I add, and methodologist, Dr. Kyle Cox, who is an assistant professor in education leadership at UNC Charlotte. We're going to talk about the impacts of the North Carolina New Teacher Support Program on beginning teacher retention. You probably remember this slide from earlier this month. The problem of teacher attrition in the beginning of teachers' careers is real. Today, I want to present an effective tool for addressing this exact issue. The North Carolina New Teacher Support Program provides coaches for new teachers. It has a well-established history of supporting teacher retention, and our particular research details for whom it's most beneficial and the types of schools in where it is most beneficial. And we want to show you how and why and advocate for the program's expansion. But to start, I want you to pause and briefly picture yourself as a beginning teacher. Maybe, as some of the wonderful students we had speak to us earlier today, you just finished student teaching or you're finishing student teaching. Maybe, as we know in the state, many are coming in from alternate pathways. So maybe a month or so ago, you were a police officer or a truck driver. Maybe you just moved here from the Philippines. And no matter what, it's your first day on the job. You have 18 kindergartners facing you right now. Maybe you have 18 15-year-olds facing you right now, and you're in charge. Let me tell you, 4 of these students have IEPs. 5 of them are multilingual learners. Another 6 of them, maybe they have an EN today. They're feeling a little edgy. You have to make it through that first day. And here's the kicker. They need you to come back tomorrow, and they need you to care about them. And they need you to help them learn hard things. And if that's a little too hard to picture from the space you are right now, maybe it's your child in that classroom. And don't you want that teacher to have a coach to help them through that first week, through that first year? That's what I'm bringing to you today. Now, remember, also from earlier this month, LEAs are possibly underreporting the number of BTs they have by a third. And in 2022, and Dr. Korn, I really tried to find this stat, but I didn't quite yet, but I'm gonna work on it. From the Teacher Working Conditions Survey from 2022, nearly 18% said that they had received no additional support as a beginning teacher. So having a coach is not guaranteed. So today, this project that I'm presenting to you is part of a larger effort. We are a research team that's part of the North Carolina Recovery Research Network. This is work that is developed by Department of Public Instruction and in collaboration with the North Carolina Collaboratory. It was funded by the General Assembly to spur research on the impact of COVID-19 on student learning in the state. This is the team. I am one of many at UNC Charlotte. We are joined even today by members of the team from the North Carolina New Teacher Support Program. We have Dr. Elizabeth Hodge is here in the audience. We have a number of new teacher support coaches here from App State in the audience as well. And we're also supported by folks at the Friday Institute at NC State who have been conducting external evaluations of this program in the recent years. Evaluations have shown that this program reduces beginning teacher attrition, yet its statewide infrastructure is currently serving less than 10% of North Carolina's beginning teachers each year. I'm not bringing this program to you to solve all of your problems. The pipeline has a lot of different leaks. However, the research that I share today will show you some of the context where it works well and hopefully help you consider how it can serve North Carolina as a key partner in supplementing the state-mandated BT support that's already in place. It can be used to target one of the biggest leaks that you have early in that career. So through what I share today, through this work, I will argue that North Carolina should increase recurring state-appropriated funds to support new teacher support programs' long-term sustainability and impact, to further engage this program as a partner to study and develop innovative solutions to the challenges experienced by beginning teachers, and more broadly speaking, to support ongoing research on coaching practices that bolster retention and effectiveness across the pipeline. Per the State Board of Education policy, regional education facilitators monitor and guide public school units to provide quality induction programs to support professional growth of beginning teachers. The public schools that partner with this program then receive comprehensive induction support that includes intensive individualized coaching. It also includes many of those other supports that were on that slide you just saw that we were discussing just a moment ago, including things like aligned professional development sessions that are aligned with district needs and a BT Institute. Since 2014, more than 9,000 teachers have been supported through this program, and I'd like you to notice this map. It is a statewide program that operates through IHEs, but it's widespread, but it's also got room to grow. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Cox.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. So I'm the research methodologist on this project, looking at the new teacher support program and teacher retention. And I'm going to start with examining teacher retention is hard. It's just the nature of the outcome. But what's kind of interesting with this program and this data set is it's well established, right? We have years and years of data. So we can do kind of a better apples to apples comparison. We have teachers when they received NTSP coaching, and we can compare that to years when they didn't receive coaching. So it's important to establish kind of the overall effect of that program. But as we've mentioned, right, we also want to know, does it work for all teachers? Does it work in different types of schools? And so that's kind of the questions that guided our work. So what did we kind of find? Well, overall, I'll start there, right? The NTSP program and coaching significantly increased teacher retention. We had data on 3 true retention outcomes. If you received NTSP coaching, you were more likely to stay in North Carolina, you were more likely to stay in your district, and you were more likely to stay in your school. I mentioned the focus being kind of across different teachers and school settings, so one of the things you can look at is consistency, and these positive effects on teacher retention were consistent. And I'll mention kind of 2. One, by teacher licensure route, right? There's many different pathways to kind of enter the profession at this point. And across those different pathways, we found the same kind of positive effects on teacher retention. The other thing is there are huge variations in teachers, right? Elementary through high school. Again, kind of consistent positive effects across those kind of school levels. I mentioned consistency, but I do get to highlight a couple of kind of differences, and they were extra particularly beneficial. So We actually found that NTSP increased teacher retention, but particularly among Black teachers, teachers in urban and suburban schools, and in schools with many economically disadvantaged students, and also many non-white students. And one final kind of point where we found some additional teacher retention increases were when you had building with many teachers that had 3 or less years of experience. And I'm going to hit on a couple of these points. I want to highlight a few things. One, the idea that it was particularly beneficial for Black teachers, right? This aligns with some of the things we've heard from NC Teach, from the DRIVE Task Force. We have a diverse student population. Our teacher population has not kind of kept pace to reflect that. But we know when that is true, when a student kind of has the same racial identity as their teacher, we see increased engagement, we see increased attendance, we see increased achievement. So that's kind of an important point. I also want to emphasize that if you think about a building that has many teachers with less than 3 years of experience, there may not be those veteran teachers that can kind of be leveraged to support those new teachers. So this NTSP then kind of supports or kind of works in an interesting way to kind of work in those buildings as well. And my last point, this idea of the types of schools it works in with economically disadvantaged students and students with non-white students, I want to illustrate that point. So part of our analysis, we were able to look at the retention rate when teachers did not receive coaching. And we looked at that retention rate as the percent of students in color increased and as the percent of economically disadvantaged students increased. And as you can see from those yellow arrows, what happens in those kind of settings, you tend to get retention rates drop. This is a very common finding, right? You've probably seen it in other studies, previous research. But if you look at, for our case, when teachers received NTSP coaching, those green lines track the retention rate when they received coaching. So what we end up seeing, and what I can kind of illustrate, is that it provides kind of an important buffer, right? In these difficult to recruit and retain settings, when schools have a high percentage of students of color or a high percentage of economically disadvantaged, you really see that gap between coaching and non-coaching. And so kind of it's an important way to keep teachers in those high attrition schools. All right, I did kind of a very brief overview of our findings. I tried to highlight some teacher and school settings where it's particularly beneficial, and now the question kind of turns a little bit to, well, what is it about NTSP coaching that's kind of, that can explain why we were able to find some of these effects? And I'm gonna turn back over to Dr. Cash.
All right, so what makes these new teacher support program coaches stand out? First up, these coaches are experienced. The coaches that are currently serving this program average 5 years serving with the new teacher support program. They average 19 years in education. Often these years are served in administrative roles or instructional support capacities. Many of them hold specialized training. Maybe they were a national board certified teacher at one time, or they have gone through certification processes for a variety of coaching frameworks or student learning frameworks. These coaches have an experienced eye. They are walking into schools where sometimes the most veteran teacher may have just a few more years of experience than the beginning teacher they are there to support. These coaches are also flexible. The coaches provide cycles of individualized support that's grounded in a framework, but it's also adapted to teachers' needs. They tier this support within a caseload. They target support to teachers who are the most receptive and the most able to improve. These coaches are very thoughtful about how they manage their time across teachers. They also adapt to evolving situations. I have two really important examples here. I know you don't want to think about March to July 2020, but bear with me. Emergency remote teaching. Teachers were saying, what am I gonna do? Coaches were ready to step up, and they dropped most of the activities that they had been working on to focus on three things. They were focusing on emotional support for the teachers they were working with. They were focusing on classroom culture, and they were focusing on curriculum planning. Teachers said, what am I gonna do tomorrow? And the coaches were there to help them not just provide the resources, but to help them think through and plan together about what we're going to do tomorrow. In a second example, right now, how are coaches adapting? Coaches are adapting to the increase in alternative preparation pathways. The coaches are describing increasing their support for permit to teach teachers, emergency licensure teachers, in the logistics for pursuing residency licensure. They are also providing a lot of those basics in classroom management when teachers have yet to begin relevant coursework or support for that. Coaches are also external. We see this as important in a couple ways. The coach's primary responsibility is to support teachers. They do not juggle teaching responsibilities simultaneously. They do not get pulled to serve as last-minute substitutes or to serve for lunch duty. They do not have competing priorities within schools. Their allegiance is to the teachers they support, more so than the school administrators. This allows the new teacher support program coaches to build really strong relationships with the teachers they support. It builds trust. Yet, these coaches are also really connected. They typically live locally. They are connected locally to the district context as well as to individual school climate. They are connected to the state teacher preparation landscape, both in terms of being university-based, so they understand traditional preparation, as well as understanding alternate pathways. And they're connected to each other through regional and statewide teams where they are able to connect with experienced coaches who are facing similar challenges. So, how can North Carolina amplify this beginning support that is valuable? You've just heard this program is increasing teacher retention, particularly for teachers who are Black, teachers in urban and suburban schools, and in schools with many economically disadvantaged students, many non-white students, many teachers with 3 or less years of experience. You've also heard these coaches are experienced, flexible, external, connected. So, right now, this program supports somewhere between 1,200 to 1,500 teachers a year. This is less than 10% of North Carolina's BTs. Coaches have pretty high caseloads, about 1 coach for every 30 teachers, and limited time for planning and professional development. This is how it's necessitated by current funding mechanisms. You'll notice here that only 34% of their current budget is recurring state-appropriated support. Our recommendations for moving forward is that North Carolina seeks to increase the percentage of state-appropriated funding that is recurring to support long-term sustainability and the impact of the program, to further engage the program as a partner to study and develop innovative solutions to the challenges experienced by beginning teachers. This includes through research practice partnerships with school districts, EPPs, and state organizations to better understand the most pressing problems. These partnerships should also create opportunities for teachers to learn from each other and to share best practices. We also recommend to support ongoing research on the coaching practices that bolster teacher retention and effectiveness across the pipeline. So I leave you with a question. How does the new teacher support program best operate within the landscape of BT support in North Carolina? There are many supports in place already, as you know. There are state-mandated BT supports. There are advanced teacher roles. Each of these can serve as an important piece of a larger puzzle. As I said in the beginning, the new teacher support program does not solve all of your problems, but it can help you close one leak in the pipeline. The new teacher support program supports beginning teachers in building their sense of competence, autonomy, and relatedness. These are deeply human needs that will bolster them as they stay. Once they stay, there will be other supports to consider, such as advanced teacher roles and ongoing professional development. These will help teachers continue to grow in instructional quality and leadership in the years to come. So I invite you to consider what the North Carolina New Teacher Support Program does best, supporting beginning teachers in making it to the next year, and then to consider how this program should be engaged as a partner and funded to amplify that impact. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions.
I have a question. Could you tell us what other states are doing? So as we talk to our legislators or for more funding, can you tell us what other states are doing in our region for this kind of support?
I think other states are struggling with similar questions. So we have, even just recently, we were, I'm looking over at Dr. Hodge over here. The two of us were at the American Association for Colleges and Teacher Ed, AACTE, in Denver. And we had many conversations with, say, Nebraska and Virginia, who have similar new teacher support programs in place. And we're grappling with very similar questions around funding, around specifying the exact practices and how to partner with schools in the best ways. Yeah, this is a very rich space for asking questions.
I have a quick question about a couple of the data slides. The slide where you did the non-NTSP and the
Yes.
NTSP and the green and the yellow.
Yes.
What's the universe of who's counted in non-NTSP? Is it beginning teachers also? What's the universe?
So in this data set, we have tracked if they received coaching or if they didn't. So we can link.
Beginning teachers.
Yeah, the vast majority are within the 1 to 3 range. There are some, because the flexibility of the program, you could have some non-beginning teachers that then the principals or administration within that district could assign to receive support or not.
So some of the teachers in green might have more than 3 years.
They could have, yeah.
And some of the teachers in yellow
Could
might
also,
be-
right? Because it is the same teachers that I'm comparing, right? The analysis is using, I can kind of look at a teacher when they received coaching versus when they didn't. And so those two, I can track those. So if it's a teacher that has a lot of experience, right? The kind of results that we're looking at are looking at that specific teacher with lots of experience, even though the vast majority are going to be the 1 to 3. Does that make sense?
I understand that distinction, but so then like what was the N for the yellow arrow?
I think the final analysis had over 2,000 teachers that we had enough longitudinal data to do. I'd have to check the exact.
Yeah, and this was in the same districts where you had NTSP.
Yes. Yeah, so this would be, the data set was from NTSP that we could then link to the broader set of teachers using NCDPI data. So that's where the teachers that we looked at were only, they had to have participated in NTSP. They had to receive coaching at some point. Then we can link the retention outcomes using NCDPI data, and then you can compare the same teacher, right? The difficulty with a retention outcome is the fact that the same teacher, if I'm a principal or an administrator, I'm going to assign this program and these supports to the teachers that are struggling the most and most likely to leave. So one of the ways to kind of analytically get around that is to compare the same teachers to themselves. You received key teaching. Did you stay in your school? Did you stay in the state? Did you stay in your district? Versus that same teacher when they didn't receive coaching.
Okay. And have you talked about actual cost, district cost?
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Do you want, I can answer it. Sure. So, over the past several years, we have had different levels of cost to the school districts. So when it initially began in Race to the Top back in 2010, there was at no cost. It was fully, oh, thank you. I started walking and talking, sorry. It was fully funded, and so there was no cost to school districts to participate. It was at a smaller number. We had just under about 400 teachers that we supported. From 2014 on, when we received 2.2 million, is when we started to expand. And at that time, we grew and school districts started to pay $2,200 into the partnership per teacher. Now, this expanded 3 years ago when there was a legislative increase, and our Pinnacle partners still remained being charged $2,400 per teacher, and then any additional partners were paying in $2,600 per teacher.
And
And the cost of the 2.2 has not changed since the initial investment back in 2014, which has presented a challenge.
yeah, and so the 2,600 per teacher for new districts and 2,400 for those that were already in.
Correct.
Is in addition to the
The
portion of the
2.2.
2.2 million that's.
Correct.
That's a reduced cost.
Yes.
And what are your goals for your capacity?
Yeah. So part of our challenge has been the fact that it is, aside from the 2.2 million, we have received non-recurring funds. The challenge around that is that it's very hard to maintain a staff and grow and sustain that when it's non-recurring. And so our goal is to seek recurring funding, I think, as my favorite Cash and Cox have pointed out. In addition to, we've looked and sought out additional grant funding and things like that. But again, it's the recurring funds that would allow us to expand and support additional teachers. Our percentage of personnel, and I think Jeff Coltrane said that earlier today, it's around human capital. So about 86% of our budget goes to personnel. And so to be able to expand that, we actually need recurring funding to be able to do that.
So this may be part of you may just have answered part of that. So what percentage of the 2.2 million that is recurring is personnel? Or what's the total cost per teacher?
Sure. So, so I can answer it both ways, right? So in terms of the 2.2, we use all of our funding to support the program. We have an additional about 2.6 that comes in from our school district partners. So it used to be a percentage in reverse, where we were providing more and districts were paying less. Over time, that ratio changed. So school districts are actually paying a higher percentage to be able to support the program. Currently, it costs about $4,000 to about, depending upon the region, because our regions are different depending upon mileage and travel that they have to do to provide the one-on-one coaching. And so it does vary, but generally about $4,000 per teacher.
Thank you.
Do I understand correctly that the ratio is 1 to 30?
Correct.
And you're getting these kinds of results with that high of a ratio?
Yes.
Sorry, we are,
Yes.
yes.
I don't know who- I'm
However,
sorry.
we
I don't
know,
know who
we
to
do
ask.
know that a lower ratio would improve and certainly help our coaches with their caseloads. So a reduction of caseload from 1 to 25, we have done in the past. And that would be another goal of ours, is to actually be able to reduce the caseload, to be able to provide more intentional support.
And I find the most useful way to think about that is our coaches are trying to see each teacher, have a contact with each teacher once a week. So coaches are serving multiple districts. If you imagine in this area, in Western Carolina, a coach could easily spend 3 hours in the car to get to 5 teachers.
Are all the coaches based at the at an EPP?
Yes.
Yes.
I gathered that from the map, but just to make sure that I was understanding that correctly.
And one
So-
last,
And the districts sign on because they are able to pay and willing to pay the 20?
Correct.
Okay.
And our partners vary each year. We do have what we refer to as Pinnacle partners, those partnerships that we've had an extended time that have worked with us over several years, that want to continue the partnership.
last question. The people you have right now that are coaches, what percentage are retired educators?
I don't think we have any retired educators. We have, well, as I look at them,
I mean,
some of them
are
past
standing in this
principals. We
room.
have instructional coaches that have come on board. We've had teachers. So a variety of experience, none that are actual retired teachers.
Retired educators?
None.
Okay.
I have one. How do the districts that you're reaching today compare with the districts who most need this type of support?
We literally were having that conversation this morning. That is a question we're digging into even more with some of our analysis is ongoing. So for example, we are eagerly anticipating some 22-23 data from DPI. And we continue to look at nuances by region, by zone of the state. And we're very thoughtful about where there's overlap. For example, we had a recent conversation to think about overlap in terms of the districts that are being supported by the new teacher support program and districts that are being supported by advanced teacher roles. That's a meaningful question to ask. I don't have the answer, but it's important to understand where there's overlap and can it be intentional overlap? And can it be in the right spaces? Yeah, sorry. To be continued.
Yeah, thanks. I understand. Just knowing that if it's based on, to some degree, proximity to the EPP, and
So,
based on the district ability to pay,
so it's certainly, I would say it's based on the district's ability to partner and pay
Yeah.
for the support. In terms of location, potentially, although you heard that we do travel a distance. One of the things that we did through program evaluation start employing is a cohort model where we were trying to keep the number of teachers to 5 so that our coaches weren't having to travel as far. Again, this would be to reduce the cost that it takes to travel to those locations.
yeah, it costs more to go to some of our most challenged districts who have the least amount of money to pay into the program. Hence, the teachers and students in those districts continue to be underserved.
True. One of the benefits of the initial Race to the Top funding was that it was at a no cost to school
Right.
districts focused on, right, Title I. We do track that and try to support those that are most in need, but it is a challenge, like you say, for certain school districts.
We'd welcome your analysis of that as you continue
yeah,
to
sure.
do that work. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So next we have Stephanie DeShavi, the Northwest Regional Director, who is going to talk about systematic structure of support for beginning teachers. The view from the Northwest region.
Okay. Thank you. I come to you late this afternoon with no data, no dollars, and no answers. So you're in for a treat. I am here to talk to you just briefly. I'm attempting to provide a very high-level touch on beginning teacher support across the state, specifically a touch on policy. And if we have policy questions, I'm going to turn it to our expert back there, Tom, for those questions. A light touch on where we are with that policy, and then some exemplars from the Northwest region and some robust beginning teacher support programs right here in the Northwest. So what I hope to offer this afternoon is a few questions for our educational partners to consider as we begin to enhance and think about how we can continue to enhance the systematic structure of support for beginning teachers. And that language, a systematic structure of support, is borrowed directly from policy. Policy TCED 016, Beginning Teacher Support Program. Beginning with the goals of this policy will help frame more of what you're going to hear following my few words today. But the policy begins with a very simple yet powerful statement. One primary and direct goal of the Beginning Teacher Support Program is to help new teachers improve skills and build confidence to become successful educators. And that policy alone sets forth action, telling us that BTs will only reach their fullest potential with systems of support. And I'll continuously refer to these systems, which is defined and includes through policy the state, the school district, the local school, and quality mentors. Local BTSPs must be aligned to the 5 standards. It's on the next slide. And so my focus today is really primarily focusing on Standard 1, that systematic support for high-quality induction programs, which was specifically designed to promote the commitment of all stakeholders in seeing that we reach success with our BTSPs, and also calls program elements to include a plan, commitment to support, and principal engagement, which I think is a key piece. Standard 1 is inclusive of the remaining standards, and there you go. But we will be highlighting some of this, the other standards, and with some of our district highlights and how districts are turning policy into actionable and strategic outcomes for their programs at the local level. We have all LEAs must follow the requirements, these 8 requirements, and demonstrate proficiency during a 5-year monitoring cycle, which is managed by our currently managed by our regional educational facilitators, and those refs are seated on our regional teams. And just a note, for monitoring purposes, all requirements are weighted equally. So the only touch on data I have on this next slide, what you're looking at here is refs monitor 1 year prior. So what you're looking at here, again, very high level, is the top 3 areas of noncompliance from the 2020-2021 school year. So you can see the greatest area of noncompliance was induction and mentor requirements for LEAs and charters respectively, followed by observation and evaluation. The next slide, induction remains in the top 3 areas. Of course, you'll see these same 3 top areas. Again, reflects the top 3 areas of observation and evaluation, mentor requirements, and induction. And everything we heard this morning, we know that these 3 areas, without meeting that minimal requirement, that checklist, definitely begs for conversation. So we have policy, we have supporting resources that provide clear guidance to meet proficiency in that policy, but we're not meeting our goals. Our goal of helping new teachers improve skills, build confidence, and remain in the teaching profession. So are we asking the right questions? Around data, how are we continuously responding to formal and informal data about the support our system is providing? While the compliance measures intend to reinforce best practice, how does the systematic structures of support reach beyond policy to address the intent of policy? How do we measure the impact of teacher evaluation feedback? In terms of resources, reflecting on current practice, what is the return on investment on how we're leveraging our limited resources? How is our systematic structure of support supporting mentors, principals, and others that support beginning teachers? And how can we advocate for and explore different partnerships? So lots of questions that we've kind of touched on throughout this morning. So that's a lot to think about, and it's okay for us to be uncomfortable with trying to find those answers to those questions. And what we'll spotlight in districts in just a moment will kind of reflect how districts are taking charge and answering some of those questions. But aside from policy and how we're doing with that policy, this is what we do know. In this slide, this is one iteration of timeless research that describes the various attitudes displayed by beginning teachers, first-year teachers, and an approximation of when during that school year these phases tend to be apparent. And I would dare to say this extends beyond the first year, and I would dare to say almost any educator in the classroom experience could certainly relate to this. And so
they're eager. So despite teacher pay, they come to us excited and they're anxious. They're ready to conquer the world of teaching. And in just a few short months, they find themselves in that survival mode, trying to push the next day or push to the next activity. That continues that downward slide where they begin to question if teaching is the right profession. Did I make a mistake? Maybe I'm not cut out for this work. Now we have a problem because it's now teacher pay and disillusionment. We can't leave it to chance that they get back on track to that uphill trajectory where they can begin to rejuvenate and see the light at the end of the tunnel and even reach that reflection stage where they can pause, reflect on the successes to propel them to that next phase of anticipation. So again, we ask, does our current system of support appropriately and proactively address what the research has been telling us for some years now? How are we supporting those that support beginning teachers? Is there a direct correlation between BTSP compliance data and BT satisfaction and retention? For years now, we've been looking at graduation rates and talking about students drop out long before they stop showing up for class. So at what point are we really losing our teachers? And so regardless of pathway to the classroom, how are we supporting BTs and making sure they remain on that track? What's in our circle of control? And one of those circles of control for the work in my arena is looking at leveraging those expertise and resources through the regional support structure. And we look at our refs. We turn to our refs to help us not understand just compliance data, but really the data, their anecdotal data to say what's happening, what is the conversation in that direct support to districts and to schools? Where are the gaps in this systematic structure that we talk about in our policy? And where are things working in districts? How can we leverage those across the Northwest and across the state? So a few examples of this brings us back to even last month when we heard from the Southeast region on What Works Recruitment and Retention Project. You'll soon hear from partnerships here in the Northwest. And on a much smaller scale, we have the Northwest Principal Ready that you heard a little bit about last month as well, if you were with us. And this Principal Ready really came from superintendent requests to support principals and instructional feedback. And through that dialogue and through supporting those principals, and we have some of those that participated through Principal Fellows with us today, through that dialogue, we learned that there was a dire need and a huge gap in helping them just manage the evaluation process, like working through the NESIS platform. And just that's a huge undertaking, a lot of training. So that training is being offered across all 8 regions now. We also, in that dialogue, discovered there is a gap in training principals, at least in the Northwest, around observation and evaluation. So some local districts are taking that to different levels of in-house training, but we need to kind of step back and pause and really prepare our our principals for that training. So this is just one example to call our attention to the obvious, which is the principal. The principal is a key communicator, a key advocator. So not only for teacher retention, but for principal retention, again, we ask, how is this system effectively supporting the skill development and self-efficacy of our instructional leaders? Some highlights across the Northwest. I'll be talking about Wilkes, Catawba, and Caldwell County. And while these districts exemplify practices that, again, may be evident to different degrees in different districts across just not the Northwest, but the state, these districts are asking the right questions, and they are taking ownership of the intent of policy and moving beyond compliance. And while I have to say thank you to those in the room, Dr. Stover, Dr. Phipps, for letting me highlight your districts, I also have to apologize because in my few minutes here, I cannot do these programs justice. So they'll have a little bit of mic time and they may be able to add to what I'm sharing here. So I'm going to start with Caldwell County Schools. And Caldwell County Schools has built much more than just a beginning teacher support program. They exemplify a BT advocacy model. And their success is rooted in two things, in my opinion. One, a shared understanding of who they serve. beginning teachers, and everything that's going on day-to-day life of a beginning teacher. They also have committed support through full-service mentors, allowing immediate and direct access. So they're not classroom teachers trying to manage a classroom. And of course, working to get the right people in those roles. Over time, Caldwell has recognized what's working and continues to grow that, and recognized what's not, and intentionally abandoned those practices. And one of those practices was providing after school, after the instructional day, beginning teachers, they're exhausted, right? They may not be at full capacity. It may not be the prime time for professional development and further training. So they moved away from that, and now they offer a BT conference to optimize learning opportunities. They go beyond those compliance measures and just professional development, but support their teachers with lots of personal social events and advocating for personal aspects as well. Their mentors provide embedded support, co-teaching, model lessons, and real-time feedback. And one practice I found truly inspiring is that the mentor, with BT consent, is invited to participate as an advocate in post-observation conferences. And so that mentor attends. Their job is to take notes, ask questions, and then debrief that conversation that took place between the principal and the BT to make sure that they're leveraging that opportunity to really understand instructional feedback and honors the observation process as the growth model it's truly intended to be. I think that's a powerful example within their control, leveraging resources to the best of their own ability to support BTs. So thank you, Caldwell County. Catawba County Schools. Catawba County has created a tiered system of support and has clearly defined selection criteria and responsibilities for lead mentors and master mentors to ensure consistency and continuity across the local district. Mentors are selected through an application process. So this certainly elevates the mentor role by communicating the expectation of those providing the service and those receiving the service. So it's no longer just luck of the draw who's in your building and that can serve as a mentor. Another aspect of Catawba County, they have implemented student learning rounds. And this is a process which the BT identifies or selects kind of those lesson look fors to guide the observation and the feedback provided by the mentor, which really shifts the conversation from adult action to the impact of adult action by looking at what students are doing. That is the optimal instructional feedback. So Catawba County, excellent job there. We also are highlighting Wilkes County schools. Wilkes County has created a local systematic structure of support. Wilkes went out on a limb and pulled their instructional specialists back into the central office, if you will, and they have revisioned the mentor role. So they were looking at the expertise and their comfort and experience of those individual instructional specialists, and then kind of categorized them, if you will. One serves as a mentor, which is kind of the expertise in instructional delivery and leadership. They also have direct access to ELA specialists and math specialists. That's in addition to their buddy teacher. Beginning teachers serving in low-performing schools receive additional support through a partnership with ASU. And so this restructuring has certainly leveraged the expertise of current staff who participated in a mentor induction and created consistency across the district. So this exemplar is a direct result of districts who recognized we're great on compliance. We're certainly in compliance in all areas, but it's not meeting the needs of our 86 beginning teachers. So through repurposing current resources, they were able to maximize what they are providing to their beginning teachers as well. So in summary, moving from policy to practice, we continue to look forward and look to models that you're going to hear about in just a few minutes around systematic support of high-quality induction programs and how can we strengthen this systematic structure to ensure that all North Carolina beginning teachers have equitable opportunity to reach their fullest potential and remain in the field of education. So just a quick highlight from the Northwest. I'm happy to entertain any questions, but we have some partnerships being shared next. Okay.
Thank you. Next up, we have Don Phipps, our Superintendent Advisor to the Board and the Superintendent of Caldwell County Schools, who is going to give us insight into how his district built out beginning teacher supports and the differences it's made.
Thank you for allowing me the time. I want to state that we try to continually perfect our program, but we don't have a perfect program. And because the landscape constantly changes, there are going to be tweaks that we make. And one of the things that we're looking at right now, I'm talking to you about beginning teachers, BT 1s, 2s, and 3s, but we have folks that are in the residency program. We're trying to figure out what to do to provide support to them as well. But when Dr. Tomberlin presented his data recently, I wanted to go back and take a look at how our numbers compare to the state numbers, because I believe what we're doing is very effective. And I thought about whether I lead the presentation with the data or I share some information and then I share the data with you at the end. But I thought I'll start with the data because it speaks to the value and I think to the results of what we get. And what you can see on the first slide, these are our BT1s, individuals that are coming into the school system with zero experience. And our attrition rate has been good. As you look at the state comparison on the attrition rate, we've done really well. In fact, we only had one BT last year who left out of about 40 or 41 folks that we had. And the question that I think begs to be answered is, why are we able to hang on to them and what's going on? And I think there are a lot of answers to that. It's not just one thing that happens. But the next slide I wanted to share with you, and talking with Dr. Tomberlin, I put an asterisk beside this for the North Carolina part because I can't vouch for the way that every district reported the BTs. In fact, you heard in an earlier presentation that there may be some underreporting, but these are the numbers that fall under Caldwell County, I can tell you are true numbers. So when you look at our BT 1, 2s, and 3s across that 3-year time span, this is what the attrition rate looks like for us. And the only comparison that I had for the state was back in 2022-23 for you to take a look at that. But before I jump into some of the things that we do, one of the things I thought was really interesting was looking at the reasons why our beginning teachers leave. And what I found was that although there are not very many of them that are leaving, 12 of the folks who left decided on a career change. And I noticed that when they submitted their resignation and left, they were leaving in the middle of the year, which I just thought was an interesting point to ponder. Those that moved to teach to another North Carolina public school system, there were 10 of those. All of them resigned in July or beyond, which makes me believe that they were going to be back as Caldwell County teachers, but they had, for some other reason, went to other districts. And the notion that I take away from that are those folks that are not happy, that are frustrated, that choose to take a different career path. These things are happening. These career decisions are being made during the school year, and we really need to try to make a more concerted effort to be aware of that and provide support as much as we can. The program that I'm talking with you about in Caldwell began in 2010. This was in a response for more intensive needs and beginning teacher support. Prior to that, we used retired teachers and veteran and active teachers to serve as mentors, some with supplements. Currently, our mentors serve 121 beginning teachers. We have 3 full-time mentors, and the only work that they do is to support beginning teachers, and they support them across years 1, 2, and 3. And they typically specialize in grade levels at elementary, middle, and high, but there is some overlap depending on what those assignments look like. We're allowed to do this because of the commitment that we have from our Board of Education. What it costs us is the full effect of cost for individuals that have got 25 plus years of experience. So you're looking at about $270,000. When you do the math on that, it comes out for us right now to be about $1,625 per teacher. And when you think about what it costs to replace a teacher and what those attrition costs are, we feel like that's a very fair price to pay for the service that's being provided. Our contact with the BTs involve formal professional topics, but they also include a lot of informal topics, many of which I think are more important than some of the formal topics. And I know this firsthand because my wife is a mentor, and I'm aware of the times that her phone goes off and the conversations that she has with folks. And it may be about a lesson plan, it may be about an upcoming observation, but it may also be where do I get my tire fixed that I had a blowout, and those personal things that are so important for teachers in the early years. Professional development for us is designed to meet specific needs, and it's not a shotgun approach. We have the BT orientation, a 3-day event at the beginning of the school year, and we have a BT conference, which you've heard mentioned, but we also included student teachers last year. And I put on the slide here just an example of some of the topics that we have, because we try to go beyond methods and pedagogy and talk about some other things that we feel like are really important. For example, talking about finances and what retirement looks like when teachers may not be thinking about that in their first couple of years. Those things tend to be very important. They have regularly scheduled meetings, and I asked them to tell me what those things look like just so I could paint a picture for you. On average, 27 hours of individualized supports provided across all 3 of the BT areas. Generally, our mentors meet once a week with all of our BT1s. They meet once every 2 weeks with our BT2s, and then they meet once every 3 weeks with the BT3s. And across that span, it's an average of 27 hours of individualized instruction. They do a lot of reflection. They do a lot of seminars. They have critical conversations. And then the bottom 3 bullets on this slide I think are important. They provide support in a lot of areas, including just how to fill out paperwork and how to get things turned in to make sure that they're getting those done. You heard Stephanie mention that they will attend administrative observations if they're invited to do so, and then provide feedback. They have social events. In fact, last week we took 45 of our beginning teachers to the Hickory Crawdads baseball game, which was just a way to get them out of the school environment and be able to have fun with one another. Those things are really important in our opinion. And then instructional support, you can see on the slide there some of the bullets. I just wanted to provide some resources that we provide to the BT group. Things that have been created, resources that we've purchased, or opportunities that we've leveraged that are available through the state. You can see all of those provided on the slide, and this is in terms of working effectively, working efficiently, and then also making sure that we're communicating. And with communication being a topic, the communication slide shows you here what our BTs are doing. They're communicating on a regular basis. They have weekly emails and calendar invites. They're trying to model for our beginning teachers what they want them to use. I can vouch that they have telephone conferences because I'm on the other end of many of those that are going on, and know that they happen at all hours of the day. They attend a lot of after-school events to support BTs, for example, chorus concerts or band concerts, or somebody that may be doing some other role. They're involved to show the kind of support that we have in place. But the key for me, and the next to the last slide we have, are just some feedback in terms of program effectiveness. And we feel like this is very important from an accountability standpoint to be able to get this type of information to determine if we're doing what we intended to do. But the keys to the program, I think, are critical. And first of all, it's that relationships are built early on. And there has to be that trust for a beginning teacher who's in a vulnerable situation anyway, to be able to feel comfortable talking to a mentor and sharing what the concerns are to allow them to come in. The conversation and communication is bidirectional. It's initiated by both parties and goes both ways. We also stress that our mentors are in non-evaluative roles. So they're not going in to do observations that are going to be written up and used in some way by our principals, and that's very important. A strong link between building level administrators and the beginning teachers. We provide the 3 years of support formally, but I can tell you that we have a lifetime of support. I was in a Verizon store in Lenoir last week, and I was having an issue with the device, and the salesperson mentioned my name. And in the process, the person, the Verizon worker working with somebody else, came over and he said, "Are you with the Caldwell County Schools?" And I said, "I am." And he said, "My wife has your wife as a mentor." And I thought, that's great. What year is she in? Expecting to hear 1, 2, 3, or 4. And he said, "I don't know if she's in year 5 or 6, but Nancy's going to always be her mentor." And that's the kind of relationship that I think is important, that even after they graduate and they move beyond that 3rd year, there's still that support that's there because those relationships were created. And then you can see the other things that are there that I think are very important. But it's ongoing support, ongoing work to try to make sure that we do the very best that we can. what we know is that we're seeing increasing numbers of individuals in the beginning teacher ranks, and we want to do the best we can, not only to hang on to them to get them through that 3-year window, but to try to make sure that we keep them there, hopefully career-wise long, so that we have educators that are committed to the school system and match the commitment that we have to them. I try to go through that quickly out of respect for knowing that you all have had a long day, but if there are any questions, I'll take them. If not, I will yield the podium to the next speaker. Thank you.
So it sounds like, from what you say, that for the size of your district and the number of BTs that you have, 3 full-time people are sufficient?
We added the third person a year or 2 ago, and depending on what those numbers look like. And the question right now is, when we move into dealing with the support for the folks that are in their residency, do we do that as an additional add-on duty to the 3 that we have, or do we look at bringing somebody on maybe part-time to do that work? But the numbers are going to drive a lot of that. For us right now, it's basically 1 to 40 is what that number looks like in Caldwell.
I'm thinking in terms of if you were trying to set up something like this in other counties, it would be what the ratio would be.
And that
So-
1 to 40 may be misleading, because the heavy work is with the first year teacher,
ones,
where
yeah.
you're working with them once a week. So the number of second year and third year teachers allows you to have them on your roster, but you're not dealing with them in terms of a formal way every single week necessarily.
Thank you. Thanks. It sounds wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Phipps. What we see in Caldwell County is an organic, homegrown example of beginning teacher supports. Our final presentation of the day looks at a university district partnerships, and we'll welcome Dr. Betsy Rosenbaum, Dr. Matt Stover, Dr. Mike Swain, and Lisa Day.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite. Is this really the last presentation today? Dr. Allen asked in the back how I was going to capture everyone's attention. I said, I really don't know, because y'all have been here a long time, but I'll dive right into it. I'm Matt Stover. I'm the superintendent for Catawba County. With me is Dr. Rosenbaum from Appalachian State. Miss Lisa Day from Burke County. She's the BT and Assistant Support Coordinator for Burke County. Dr. Swan couldn't be with us today, so he sends his regrets. Also want to mention Dr. Hannah Reeder, our Assistant Dean here at the college. Thank you for your support, and Dr. Spooner, our Dean as well. So we could talk all day, but we won't. We will talk. I'll turn it over to Betsy Rosenbaum, but I first want to say that what all your work you're doing today is the most important work, in my opinion, for the next 50 years in North Carolina. You heard from our young folks up here what the realities are. You see it every day. You hear it every day. So we've taken a step forward in Catawba and Burke and our other neighbors here in the Northwest to try to grow our own teachers. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Rosenbaum.
Thank you, Dr. Stover. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you today. I'm Betsy Rosenbaum, the Director of the Public School Partnership here at Appalachian, as well as the Regional Director for North Carolina New Teacher Support and the Director for the Principal Fellows Program here at App State. As you see the map on the screen, you notice that we work closely with our partners in the Northwest region of this state, and the 3 stars you see represent Appalachian State, as well as my partners here on this presentation in Burke County and in Catawba County. I also work with the 17 other public school units that are represented in our Northwest region. My partners are here today in Ashe County and Allegheny. We've had several representatives here that have been a part of our partnership. The Public School Partnership has been in place since 1987 here at App State as a collaborative network of support that is focused on supporting pre-service teachers and preparing them for schools, and then also focused on supporting teachers and principals and other leaders and educators in the public schools schools around Appalachian State University. And so through the public school partnership, we are able to be governed by our superintendents. We meet quarterly. In fact, we just met last Friday. Dr. Issa Cox is our chairperson of our governing board this year. With those 19 PSUs, also includes our lab schools. We work together collaboratively to solve problems here in our region. We also meet with our community college partners in this region annually, along with our superintendents, again, to discuss problems of practice around the pipeline and the ways that we can support each other in growing educators in our region. And we also provide things such as resources, mini grants, scholarship opportunities, as I've mentioned, with things like the North Carolina Principal Fellows Program, some of which are here with us today. We also provide the coaching opportunity through North Carolina New Teacher Support, as we've heard about today. And we currently serve 155 new teachers in this region in 13 PSUs through those 5 coaches that have 30 folks on their caseload. We have a robust Office of Field Experiences here. We have a large footprint across the state. We currently have 57 MOUs where we have placements for interns and student teachers. We have 1,473 students right now that are in internship placements, whether that be in early field or student teaching, and 53 of those are residency licensure students this school year. We have robust relationships with not only our superintendents, but also our curriculum directors, who I meet with every month in the Northwest RESA, as well as our HR directors that we meet with every semester. So these are just some of the things that we do to support our region, and my colleagues and I are going to share a few more of those pieces with you.
Thank you. So several years ago, back before I had gray hair and a lot more of it, I was a principal of a high school, and they had a program called Teacher Cadet. And at the time, I didn't realize how important that program was. And so as my years progressed, came to Catawba County, and that became one of our points of emphasis to try to grow our own folks. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. We have a Teacher Cadet program in Catawba County Schools. A lot of school districts have this. But we partnered with Appalachian State on that to kind of grow it, to make it even better, more robust. We are thankful we have 60 students in the Teacher Cadet 1 program at 4 of our high schools and 16 in Teacher Cadet 2. You heard our young folks earlier say they talked about their favorite teacher and what made them get into it. What better recruiting tool than our own teachers? And so that's what we're using. They help mold them, develop them. They get to go on instructional rounds as students in high school. They get to go work with our other teachers across the district. And hopefully, we plant a seed that they want to be in the education profession and then obviously come back selfishly and work in Catawba County Schools, but anywhere would be great in the state of North Carolina. One of the other things we do in this program that has been especially successful is our friends from Appalachian come and visit. And of course, given the success of Appalachian State's football and all their sporting programs, that's very popular with our students. And then they get to learn about how the academics are also excel here as well. So we try to kind of hook them with that and get them excited about school. And then they teach them about the community college option, how you can pay, all those good things, just so we have a full recruitment of our own teachers and we capture their attention. We also have a support academy for our student teachers that I'd like to just kind of briefly touch on. When a student teacher comes to us, that is our option to start our courting of employing them. And that's how we treat it. They're part of our family as they come to be a student teacher. And so we actually meet with them like we do our beginning teachers. We fold them into that. And we want them to feel part of Catawba County Schools. Then hopefully they come on board to work for us. We just had a student teacher luncheon the other day. Several student teachers, not only from our district, from surrounding districts came, and we were able to put on a presentation for them, give them the opportunity to share, and kind of just court them, continue to do that. Now, in beginning teacher support, we kind of do the same thing. Just because they come on board with us doesn't mean that we have to stop I think treating them as family and then keeping them engaged in the workplace. One of the things we do is our intentional coaching. We get to do rounds with our teachers. Our new teachers go out and visit other teachers. You'll see in our teacher working conditions survey in Catawba County, that was one of the things that stood out, is that they were thankful that they could go out and observe other teachers. We used to do it the other way around. Mentor teachers would go observe them, and we realized that the young teachers wanted to go see them, right? And that makes more sense. So we adapted to that. So we do a lot of those different things. We also do a Beginning Teacher Academy, and all year we stay in touch with them. You already heard about our robust mentoring program. Thank Fred Whalen and Ray Thompson, who lead that up in our district. But our beginning teachers are kind of like student teachers. We treat them as professionals, but we really hold on to them, nurture them, guide them, because we want them to stick around for the long haul. The last thing I want to talk about is now what this looks like as far as transition into the residency licensure. As you guys know, we're hiring folks who don't have the traditional educational training. And you'll see there that 62 of our 168 BTs are alternative licensed teachers. And so 23 of those are BT1s. And I just want to put this in your mind. As long as I've been in education 25 years now, which isn't exactly a long time, but we've always had lateral entry or residency licensed teachers in high schools. Okay, that's nothing new. You know, some middle school, folks, we've got residency licensed teachers in elementary school, as you know. And I will tell you, if we're going to build foundations of reading, foundations of math, it's got to be with folks who are well trained. And so these folks who are coming to residency, now more than ever, is it important for us to have mentors going in, instructional coaches, them going to watch others, observe others. It is critical that we have well-trained teachers that are able to do that. So residency licensed teachers are kind of like the student teachers. And that's how we're trying to give them the training just like student teachers. And so I applaud your efforts today for working on this and giving us the opportunity to share best practice across the state, so we can really, the huge barrier in front of us to try to get well-trained teachers in the state of North Carolina. So thank you. I think I'm turning it over to Ms. Day.
Thank you so much for having us today. I'm Lisa Day, and I'm the beginning teacher and assistant principal support coordinator for Burke County Public Schools. And everything that we talked about today, I was shaking my head because these are real issues and things that we need to talk about. But just as we were talking about Catawba's Teacher Cadet, we are also growing our Teacher Cadet program too. Next year in 3 of our high schools, we will have Teacher Cadet 1 and 2 with 69 students in those courses. So we are super excited about that. And we are also excited that we are talking about a partnership where we can walk our students and our TAs through a program through us, through Western Piedmont, and with App State Hickory. So we are really excited about that. With that, as we were talking about the residency, we also have high numbers. We have 58 out of 145 of our beginning teachers who are in a residency program. That's high. So the amount of support that we need to give those teachers is so different than those who went through an initial license process. So with that, we have partnered with ASU to learn more about the EdCPA process, because these residency teachers are going through that as they are teaching, and it is extremely stressful for them to go through this process. And so all 26 of our mentors, our coaches, attended this year. Thank you to App State for that. We also pull in other App State leaders to help us with other leadership professional development that we have. Dr. Julie Hassan came down and worked with our teacher leaders, as well as our Beginning Teacher Symposium. Burke County really prides itself on its leadership development structure that we have. Once you enter as a beginning teacher, we are there to build your leadership capacity no matter where you go in our district. So I have a great job in that I'm in a lot of these. And so from beginning teachers to our leadership forum, we want you to feel comfortable leading where you are. So if you're a teacher and you do not see yourself leaving the classroom, that's okay. I want you to be the very best classroom teacher that you can be and lead in your school. We also have an Aspiring Leaders panel This year, we started supporting the next generation. So we met quarterly with principals who host assistant principals to help guide them as they're training their assistant principals for that next level. We find that that is super important. Then we also host an AP Leadership Academy where I'll work with them each month for a full day for their first 2 years as an assistant principal to build their leadership capacity. And then when they take the next step to new principal support, for their first 3 years as a principal, we work with them. So we are guiding them on that process.
One of the wonderful things about the Public School Partnership is that we can embed partnerships in all of the curriculum and the coursework that we do. As a part of our North Carolina Principal Fellows Program, we've partnered with 10 of our district partners to bring in the cohorts of Principal Fellows. We just actually are getting ready to graduate our first cohort next Friday, and we'll bring in the second cohort where we have 11 partners in this work. But part of that partnership with our Principal Fellows Program is for our partners to offer a leadership day in their county. And so when our Principal Fellows graduate, they will have had an opportunity to spend a full day in each of the partnership districts shadowing the school administration and the district administration, visiting schools and learning about the context of that partnership, of that district. These are some pictures of our partnership with Burke County and our leadership day there last December. These are some of our Principal Fellows and our team here visiting in Burke County. But it's a wonderful way for our Principal Fellows to graduate at the end of their 2-year program with an opportunity to say, I am familiar with leaders in 10 partnership districts, and I am aware of what leadership looks like in this northwest part of the region and the state. So we're very proud of that partnership. And so I wanted to highlight that as a part of a partnership that we have with many of our superintendents and their districts in our region. We're going to end with a story about a special beginning teacher in Burke County.
So as we wrap up, this is Cassidy Upton, and she was our beginning teacher of the year this year, and she made it to the NCAP finals this year. It's so exciting to celebrate her. This weekend, she was also awarded the Delta Kappa Gamma Beginning Teacher of the Year award as well. So we celebrate her. And one thing you need to know is she drives 45 minutes to come to our district. She does not live in our district. She's not from our district. So that's what the love, care, and support that we give to our beginning teachers and how much that matters. And in order for us to have longevity for our teachers and for them to stay with us and for them to grow, especially our residency teachers, we need to provide that bridge between what we offer and their success for student success. So thank you.
We are happy to answer any questions you have about the public school partnership at large or specifics about Burke or Catawba County.
Great. Questions or comments? Mr. Blackburn.
First of all, thank you all so much, and it makes me very proud of what's happening in the Northwest region and at App State, so thank you for that. How do we make this statewide? So that's a big question, but I'll throw it out to you. So are y'all willing to get on the road and help other folks learn how to do this?
I'll say we had an interesting conversation. Dr. Hodge, you remember this conversation in Greensboro a couple of weeks ago when all the regional directors for North Carolina New Teacher Support got together. And we were talking about beginning teacher support in each of our regions. And of course, I'm here in this Northwest region. And we talked about how do we help our partners or our district leaders understand the support that we have in that program and how can we spread that good news. And I said, I have a unique opportunity as I looked around the room at the other regional directors that I have this public school partnership as a platform for sharing, for providing resources, and for partnering in things that are of this importance. And being able to speak to superintendents on a quarterly basis and have that constant dialogue and co-creation of support and resources and curriculum helps us to build out supports that have an impact at multiple layers. And so I think public school partnerships coming out of EPPs and supporting those regions, in addition to locking arms with our RESA, which we do very well at every level at App State, allows us to really infiltrate this region and support them in the unique and contextual ways that are needed. And so I think just thinking about how EPPs can connect with those districts in their region and support through the RESA could be a very a scalable model that might be appropriate across the state.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on what you're saying and add that App State is a really good example of an EPP that partners well with districts. Yeah. And that puts their time, resources, and energy into the practical and is very much willing to get in the mud with our educators and do the hard work. And I appreciate that about App State.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to say at least from my perspective this afternoon, this has also highlighted for me, we talk so often about the BTs and the support that they need, but this afternoon, we're hearing about residency teachers, and that just is critical. And I'm not sure that was on my, it was top of my mind, but I think it will be now. I think that's something that we've got to seriously think about.
I just want to say thank you to all for your service. You guys have you have it right. You're leading from the classroom out, and I appreciate that. As a superintendent, you're taking care of kids, and you're trying to do the best you can with staff. I applaud you all on those efforts, so thank you.
Back at you on that one. Yeah.
Thank
Anyone
you so
else? Okay. Rupin, anything else today?
No, well, I guess, yes, just one thing. Beginning teacher supports, as we just saw in the last several presentations, happen on the ground. We depend on our districts and charter schools alongside their partners to perform this vital function for educators. The last thing for you guys is to think about what can we do at the state level, particularly through monitoring, messaging, and supporting public school units to address this critical work. And so in the agenda, I had a breakout session, but I'm actually going to email you this question. All of y'all email you this question. So I'm going to assign you some homework. And I'm going to ask you to reflect on what you heard today. Think about it in the context of the reports you've received over the past 3 months. And I ask for your thoughts so I can provide your input to Dr. Derek Jordan, who leads this work at DPI. And I'll end it there.
Okay. Any questions on our homework assignment? All right. Up to the professor.
No, it's not. I'll grade it, and we'll put your grades on the dashboard, on the state board's dashboard.
Perfect. All right, great. So before we conclude, I just pause for a few moments and see if anyone has any reflections, observations, thoughts about what we've experienced today here at App State. Any thoughts? Yes, sir.
We've looked at a lot of the pieces that go into the puzzle. But at the end of the day, I go back to something that was alluded to earlier today, and that is, I think, a pervasive problem. That's the trust that the people of North Carolina have in their state education system, and the respect or the lack thereof for education, and the respect or the lack thereof for teachers. There was a time when teachers were revered in their community. They were looked upon with respect. They were looked upon with admiration. They were applauded by their community for their lifelong dedication to education and to children. And so to me, looking at the pieces in the puzzle, the bigger question is, how do we get that back? How do we get that back? How do we get our state to hold that level of respect for people who labor in the trenches every day and educate their children and build the future of this state? Certainly we do that by working at the pieces and making all the pieces work well and making the pieces work together. But there's still in my mind and a concern that I have about that big picture, that level of trust and admiration that I think we need to work hard to regain. So then it makes me wonder what can, and this is in an advisory capacity, I'm talking to the folks that actually serve on this board, what can this State Board of Education do to recoup, to get back that level of admiration that we have for our schools and our teachers? That's a concern that I have. Doesn't haunt me, doesn't keep me awake at night, but it keeps coming back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Other thoughts? Ms. Camus?
I mean, we started off this morning with Jeff's presentation about and then are focused in on the need for a highly effective teacher in every classroom. And I feel like today we've gone through step by step how we get to that. We know, I think we really know what we need to do, or we know what big pieces of the puzzle are. We just have to really concentrate on finding ways to make sure that they're happening across every district in this state, and advocate for whatever programs we need to advocate for. I mean, for funding, from the funding point of view.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts? Well, it's hard to argue with the goal of an effective teacher in every classroom, regardless of background or affiliation or any other item that might divide us. That goal ought to bring us together because we all win. And Mr. Williams, I think you hit it right on the head about admiring and respecting teachers. There's no other profession that every other profession depends on than our teachers. And it's in all of our own self-best interest to support our teachers. Yeah, we face some of the challenges that our state faces in meeting that goal. But I got to tell you, listening to those aspiring teachers, and even one who chose not to, gives me great confidence in the future. I mean, listening to superintendents at lunch and listening to other members in the audience who presented to us today, and the great work that's going on in the Northwest region, what we heard today, but it's going on all over this state. We just need more of it. We need to support it more. So I think today was a great start. We learned a lot, and it inspires us to do so much more tomorrow. So speaking of tomorrow, we'll reconvene here promptly at 10 a.m. for another day of good work and good learning and good listening about the great things that are happening in North Carolina Public Schools. So look forward to seeing you in the morning. We are adjourned until then.